Namaste friends. My father, Sri PVS Achalpatirao Garu, was my first astrology guru. He was not really a famous astrologer except in his own circles, but there is one thing unique about him. Every great or famous astrologer that I know has made several wrong predictions. But my father is the only astrologer I know who never made an incorrect prediction to the best of my knowledge. He was born in the early morning of 1933, July 15. So today or tomorrow is his 90th birth anniversary. On this occasion, I want to remember him and recount some incidents from his life and some characteristics of him that can be inspirational to others. There were a lot of people like him in the old India, but in the new materialistic India, people like him are very rare. So it may be useful to remember him. He was a very courageous person, and he was sometimes stubborn, but at the same time, he was a highly dharmik man. But at the same time, he was not rigid. He applied his intellect. He felt free to break any conventions that he thought were meaningless or perversions. He lived life on his terms and always did what he thought was dharma. And he never tried to impress others or wear a mask for others. He spoke his mind freely like a child, and there was no filter basically. But the thing is, as I said, he had a great level of Vagbala that ensured that he never made a wrong prediction. Perhaps that came from his Satyavrata. He basically never spoke a lie. He had a rule, a vrata, for never speaking a lie and always speaking truth. Even if it was uncomfortable to him or people in front of him, he did not care. He always spoke truth. Actually, I remember one interesting incident. His maternal grandfather, he was a great scholar in a small town or village called Ghantasala in Andhra Pradesh. His name was not Ghantasala, Chalapalli. His name is Ghantasala Narasimham Garu. He was a great Ayurvedic doctor, homeopathy doctor, and also an astrologer. If you hold something in your hand and ask him what is in my hand, he will cast a prasna, and based on the planetary positions, he will exactly tell what it is, and he never went wrong. Also, he had a reputation locally for making dead people alive with his medicines, with his Ayurvedic and homeopathic medicines. Anyway, I mentioned about my father on my website. This was like a couple of decades back, and I mentioned that he learned astrology from his maternal grandfather, and then he saw it one day and he complained to me. He told me that is a lie. Maybe I had his blessings and maybe I have his genes, but I never learned from him directly from my grandfather. So it's a lie. I said it doesn't really matter. It's subjective truth. He said no. It's lie. Remove it. Don't have it in your website. So I basically removed it. Like that, he was particular about never saying anything that was not true 100%. So very specific things because of this Satyavrata. Perhaps mother blessed him so that even things he said, predictions he made never went wrong. So very specific things he said. Sometimes perhaps without any astrological reasoning also came true. And of course, the other thing behind his perfect predictions, apart from the Satyavrata, the principle of speaking truth, is he did prayers for long hours. Every day, he would sit for 2-3 hours at a stretch and chant various stotras, mantras, Ashtotra stotras, etc. And particularly Ashtotra stotras of Mahalakshmi, Brihaspati, Shani, Mangal, and various other grahas were his favorites. And another favorite prayer of his was Adi Shankara's composition, Lakshmi Narasimha Karavalamba Stotram. It's a very fantastic prayer. He also loved Mantrajapada Stotram, another prayer of Narasimha taught by Shiva to Parvati. He was a devotee of Mahalakshmi, Narasimha, Ramachandra, and he particularly was fond of Vatapatra Sai, which is a form of baby Krishna who's lying on a banyan leaf and floating in the ocean, which is representative of this whole samsara, this whole cosmos. He was, though he did long prayers, every day he spent 2-3 hours and sometimes maybe 5-6 hours also in prayers. He was not really very ritualistic. At the same time, he did not condone rituals. When I started doing Homa and teaching Homa to people, he was very appreciative of it. But he himself was not very ritualistic. But he spent time in pujas, chanting prayers and meditating. And he did not do elaborate external rituals. He just lit a light lamp. He chanted mantras and stotras for hours. And at the end, he offered some kismis, raisins, as naivedyam, and he just did arati with camphor. That's it basically. He did not do elaborate rituals, but he did spend a lot of time trying to connect with God. And he strictly enforced one thing though. He followed external purity, madi, what we call in Telugu as madi. Basically, take bath and wear clean clothes, and after that nobody will touch him and he will do his prayers. But one thing is, his needs were very simple. He was a man who believed in simple living and high thinking. He did not make a lot of money as a lecturer in a college, but most of the money he got, he basically gave it away in anonymous charity. He supported some students who could not afford studies. He never really advertised this. We happen to know it. I'm saying it publicly, but he never did. But he lived very simple life, and even the clothes he wore, he just had a couple of pairs of clothes, one vesti or dhoti you wear at the bottom, and then one shirt, both cotton, and just a couple of pairs that he wore for his maybe a couple of decades, and then maybe every 20 years he will introduce a new pair of clothes. So he didn't have a lot of clothes that he wore. And another thing is, these clothes were only when he was going out. When he was home, or most of the time, he's just wearing one towel. That's it basically. So even when some VIPs visit him, some local VIPs or powerful people come, he doesn't care. He just wore a towel and then sat with them. And my mother or we were embarrassed by it, but he wasn't. He basically did not care about what he was wearing. He loved sleeping on hard floor. He never used a bed or a mattress or anything soft. He always slept on a hard floor, and he always had solid sleep. And another thing is, he never rode a bicycle or a motorcycle. He always walked, and every day he used to walk tens of miles. And even when he came to Chennai or Hyderabad, a big city, he would still walk from the train station or bus stand to the place where we were living or my hostel. He would just walk for miles. He basically used bus and train only to go long distances from one city to another city. And one more thing he followed is, he believed that the food that you eat, the energy in the food, not just the calories, but the spiritual energy in the food based on the thoughts of the person who prepared the food will affect you. So he never ate outside and ate food cooked only by himself, my mother and a handful of people. He did not really eat outside, but the thing is, he was traveling a lot. He would travel for a month or two at a stretch, and at that time he would survive on fruits, milk, maybe maximum yogurt, curds, etc., and mostly fruits, bananas and milk. And he used to travel for 6 months a year, and 1 or 2 months at a stretch sometimes. And he used to see all kinds of places, like go on pilgrimages, see various temples, etc. And when he eats, he can eat food that is normally consumed by 4 or 5 people. But the thing is, he could go without serious food, just fruits and milk for long periods of time. He had that control over his Jatragni. He loved going to temples, and he went to Tirumala every few months. That was his favorite temple. And he went on pilgrimage to various other places, and he spent months, like I said. And he loved seeing different parts of India: North India, South India, East India, West India. He even, apart from temples, he even went to Ladakh and Leh to see the place where the Kargil war was fought. I think at that time he was in his 70s. And among the places he visited, he particularly loved Rishikesh. Apart from all the famous temples there is a small Balaji temple, Venkateshwara temple, maintained by TTD, Tirumala Tirupati Devasthanam. They do the same pujas they do at Tirumala in that temple in Rishikesh. And there is a Chandramoulishwar temple on the other side. So there is a Satram, an inn, and Venkateswara and Shiva temples on both sides. So he used to live in that inn and just spend all his time in those temples. He loved those temples, and he particularly loved a temple in Chittorgarh where Mirabai is said to have merged in Sri Krishna. He also loved, there is a Seni temple. There are several famous Saneshwara temples, but there is one temple in Amritsar, just outside Golden Temple. And my father really loved that temple. And he loved several temples in Indore also, in Madhya Pradesh. And particularly there is a Mahalakshmi temple there. He really loved it. And around Tirumala and Tiruchanur, where the Mahalakshmi temple is there, the Alivenu Mangapuram, those two are famous. But there is another place called Srinivasa Mangapuram and also Narayanavanam, where Lord Venkateswara is supposed to have gotten married. So he particularly loved Narayanavanam. So he loved spending time there. Not many people visit there. It's so calm and peaceful. You can just sit there and think of God. It's so pleasant. He loved that particular place. And he loved various Narasimha temples because he was really attached to Lord Narasimha. I said he was not ritualistic, and even the way he performed our Upayanam, my and my brothers, younger brothers' Upayanam, was very different. And it was very simple and unique. Basically, I was at IIT Madras at that time. So he and my brother came from our native town to Tirumala. I took a bus from Madras to Tirumala, and we all had darshan of Lord Venkateswara, and we went back to the cottage where we were staying. He chanted mantras for a couple of hours, waited till the muhurta. At the time of the muhurta, he said the Gayatri mantra to both of us right in that room, and then he made us repeat it a few times. And when he was kind of comfortable that we were pronouncing correctly, he said, "We are done, and make sure that you are meditating with it regularly." And then that's it. Basically, all the three of us left. So there was no ritual there. There was not even a lamp, and there was not a lot of crowd. Normally for Upayanam, people have a lot of crowd. In the old days, the Vivaha is when two people are coming together. So you get a lot of people to come and know about it from a societal perspective and give their blessings. But Upayanam is really like a mantropadesham. So you basically don't necessarily need a lot of people, lot of different energies colluding there. You just need the person who's giving the mantra and the person. So he basically kept it simple. So it's as simple as that. Normally it is a long and elaborate ritual, but he saw no point in that, and this is what really mattered in his opinion, and he did it. The thing is, one unique thing about him is he's supremely confident once he realizes this is what should be done and others are secondary. He's supremely confident and feels absolutely free to break any rules and conventions that don't make sense to him. Another thing there with the Upayanam is, the thumb rule is, if you do Upayanam to two sons at the same time, it can bring you death. It's not really advised in the tradition. But he basically said, why? If I can give mantra to one person, why can't I give it to two or three people? The thing is, of course, you lose energy, you lose some Shakti by when you transfer some Shakti to somebody. So that is probably why if you give it to too many people at the same time, it causes some Shakti Kshaya, some decay of Shakti. So basically people are concerned. But the thing is, he was comfortable that he could handle it, so he had no fear about death. So once he sees this rule is not really correct, there is no fear or doubt in his mind. Whereas I or many other people I know, they think twice, thrice, four times because there is some doubt in the mind. In his case, when he knows something, he knows. It's like the mother is telling him, "This is fine, my son, do it." I want to give another example. An interesting example of his attitude towards certain parts of the rituals. He was once at a Graha Pravesh ceremony. The ceremony was in a second floor apartment because somebody was doing housewarming in a second floor apartment. And normally the ritual, there was a priest who was doing the ritual. He was just there as a visitor and also as the astrologer who gave the muhurta. The ritual consists of making a cow come to the room and drop some cow dung there, and then you smear that cow dung there in the middle of the room. So that is considered auspicious. So They were trying to force the cow to climb the stairs, and it was resisting. So after trying softly, gently, they started resorting to violence. They were poking it with a rod or something, and they were. It was crying. It was not pleased about it. The cow was crying, but they, at any cost, they wanted to get the cow into the apartment. My father saw this and he became mad. He became angry and mad at the priest and the homeowner, and he yelled at them. If you use violence against a cow, do you think you will get blessings for it? You fools will suffer for this sinful violence. He really was angry. He felt the sadness, sorrow, and anger that the cow was feeling. He left the place angrily. He sat outside and he was trembling with anger and sorrow. Now, one small word here. Of course, sadly, the priest continued with the ritual because he thought it had to be done. It could not be compromised. Now, one small word here is people have these stereotypes of saints, yogis, sadhus, etc. They think that they have to be sweet, sometimes even possibly artificially sweet, very gentle, etc. That's not really the dharmic understanding. That's not really. If you look at stories in Puranas, you have rishis who get angry and who give shapas, etc. So it's the modern stereotypes based on these caricatures of Gautama Buddha, Jesus Christ, etc. These are just caricatures. These are dumb stereotypes. The thing is not whether you are gentle or you are fierce. What really matters is whether you are doing it for dharma or not, whether you are selfless or selfish. That is what defines a yogi or a saint or a sadhu. For dharma, sometimes you have to be angry, you have to fight, you have to be harsh, you have to be fierce. Now coming back to this ritual, this story, the sad thing is, after all, this is deep Kali Yuga. So many people, even including those who are learned in Shastras, at least the letter of the Shastras, they are foolish enough to follow the letter of the rules while torturing the spirit behind. Whereas my father, he strived to understand the spirit and the essence, and he felt free to break the letter sometimes to follow the spirit. Now, another example, in weddings in the Andhra Pradesh state, bride and bridegroom apply a paste of jeera, cumin seeds, and jaggery. It is applied on the head. Each puts it on the other person's head, and people do that at the Muhurta time. Whereas my father concluded, Mangalsutra Dharana is the real Muhurta event. When that happens, you consider them husband and wife. Until then, you don't consider them husband and wife. There are a lot of rituals, and putting the cumin seed and jaggery paste is just another part of those rituals. It is the Mangalsutra Dharana. So with the Mangalyam Tantunanena Mama Jivan Hetuna, with that mantra, that is what completes the marriage. So he ensured that at our weddings and people close to us, family members, he ensured that the Mangalsutra Dharana happened at the Muhurta time, not the Jelkarra Bellam, not the cumin seed, paste and jaggery. The thing is, once he decides something, once something is clear in his head, he's supremely confident, and there's no shanka, there's no doubt in his mind. Now, talking about weddings, there is another thing. In the wedding muhurtas, there is a rule called Saptama Shuddhi. In the muhurta chart, you want to ensure Saptama Shuddhi, which literally means Shuddhi of the seventh house. Shuddhi means cleanliness. So, normal interpretation is the seventh house should be empty. There should not be any planets in the seventh house. But my father said, why does cleanliness mean emptiness? An empty house may still be unclean because a bad planet is aspecting it. He is having drishti on it. He is having vision on it. It can still be unclean. Whereas a house having a planet, for example, Jupiter, he is the planet of wisdom. He basically personifies our wisdom and Dhishakti. If he is in the seventh house, he is blessing it. It's not really unclean. What can be cleaner than having Jupiter? So, for example, for my wedding, I got married in Meena Lagna with Jupiter in the seventh house. Lagna Lord Jupiter in the seventh house. My brother got married in Kanya Lagna with Jupiter in one house, exalted Venus and Mercury in Lagna. So, three benefics in the seventh house. Mercury, Jupiter and Venus in the seventh house. So, both of us got married with planets in the seventh house. And in my case, in a couple of weeks, I will finish 30 years of marriage, and we were able to have a long married life and complement each other well and do our part in this world pretty well. So the thing is, uh, the standard interpretation is not really a logical thing, and in my opinion, my father's interpretation is actually more logical. Shuddhi doesn't mean empty. Moreover, some of these rules are not really coming from Parashara or anybody. These are relatively modern ones. So sometimes when a rule is modern and it doesn't make sense, he breaks it. But sometimes the rule makes sense, but people don't use it correctly. They misinterpret it. So he always, once something is clear, like I said, it's like the mother is telling him, "My child, this is what it really means, son," and then he just follows it. He has no doubt at all in his mind. But the thing is, he boldly reformed the rules in his own practice. The problem is, whether in astrology or spirituality, most people today are busy conforming to various silly traditions, conventions, and rules, either out of fear or out of lethargy. But my father, he boldly reformed the rules in his own practice, and he transferred that knowledge to people in his close circle. But he did not seek limelight or try to become famous, because he was happy to live a life of solitude and help just a few people who he came in touch with. But having said that, with the few people he picked, however, he guided them regularly. At the time of key planetary transits or birthdays, etc., he would call them ahead and tell them to do a specific prayer at a specific time in a particular manner. So he always guided people who were really close to him. And one thing unique about him is he had tremendous amount of willpower and self-belief and resilience. Like I said, he would not eat for days together and still be fine, just survive on bananas and milk. But I'll give another example. Once, when he was in Tirupati, an auto rickshaw crushed his foot, and his toes were crushed, and there was blood coming out. And the auto rickshaw driver was really scared. He was very concerned. He said, "Sir, I'll take you to a nearby hospital." My father refused and sent him away. Go away. And then he found out where the nearest Ayurvedic store is. He walked 2 miles with that foot with crushed toes. He walked 2 miles and he went to an Ayurvedic store. He bought some medicines. He applied some externally. He took some internally, and he treated himself. And he went on to continue his trip. Actually, even more severe incident is, I think 5-6 years before he passed away, a motorcycle hit him. He fell down, and it went over his stomach area, went over his body. So that really affected him. So he was carried to his house. He didn't want to go to a hospital. He never went to allopathy. He basically practiced only homeopathy in the beginning of his life, and later he switched to Ayurveda. He just practiced those by himself, himself, and also people close to him like us. He never went to an allopathy doctor. So even with that severe accident, he wanted to go home, and he had some medicines prepared for him, Ayurvedic medicines under his guidance. He had them applied, he took them, and then basically once he was fit enough in a few days, he basically took care of himself. So he had the tremendous willpower. Where people will panic and worry about things, he basically is like, yeah, this too shall pass. That was his attitude. Of course, many times when we are in serious troubles, panicking about it and worrying too much doesn't really make us more productive or effective in solving the crisis. By focusing on what we need to do and doing it with a focused mind, we actually help ourselves. But the problem is, you need a lot of willpower to do that, and my father had that. He had Vargottama Surya in Lagna. Probably that is what gave that. And also he had Mercury and Venus in the two benefics in the second house of speech with Argala from Jupiter, and that's probably what gave him the Vagbala. I clearly remember one really unique incident from his life a few years before his death. It was around 3 a.m. in India at that time. I was in Greater Boston at work then. He was alone at home at that time. In general, he loved to live alone. He traveled, and then traveling also he did alone. and he visited my sister and her husband, their children, and my mother. Typically used to be with them, so he visited them now and then. But other than that, he was at the native town at home or traveling by himself. So he was alone at home at that time, and he suddenly felt extremely weak, and he felt like the life force was withdrawing from him. It was being squeezed out of his body. And astrologically also, he thought Gochara was bad then, and there was a danger to his life. There was a Ganda. And normally, when alone and facing a crisis like that, most people would have panicked. They would have called a doctor or at least called someone so that you get some help. My father, he just lied down on the floor and he started mentally chanting various stotras. His thinking was, if I go now, let me go in peace, thinking of God and not in panic. If he left the body and people did not find the lifeless body for several days and a decade, it did not mean anything to him, because normally people are attached to useless things. Once the Sukshma Sarira leaves the Sthula Sarira, once the Jiva leaves the body is just a bunch of matter. It has nothing basically. It is not you basically. Whatever happens to it, it doesn't really affect you. You are the Jiva that left the body. So these kind of things that normally people obsess about, he didn't care. So he didn't worry about what if my body is not found for 10 days after my death. He didn't care about that. He just lied down and he started chanting mantras, and his focus was to think of God when he's leaving. Because Shastras say, whatever thought you get at the moment Jiva is leaving that particular Sthula Sarira, that is the basis for the next life. That becomes the foundation for the next life. So you better have the right thought. So he basically started meditating, and he focused mind on God and tried to remain in peace and leave the body in peace. And then after about an hour, he felt better, and he got this sanguine feeling from within, like somebody clearly told him that danger has passed. Now you are safe. Now you will live some more years until the next Gandhar. So then he got up. He basically had some water. He made some Ayurvedic medicines, taken them to stabilize his physical system, and then he called me. The first thing he did after that was he called me to report what happened. And like I said, I was at work in Greater Boston. I was like, oh, this is so late. This is like very late in the night. Why is he calling now? I was worried. So I immediately took the phone. He told me what happened. He said, please don't tell your mother and sister, because they would be worried for him and they will think twice before leaving him alone going forward. And he loved being alone. He didn't want people around him. And he basically said, you are an astrologer like me, so this data with close brush with death, the Ganda basically passing, can be useful to you in your research. So that is why I'm giving data to an astrologer. That is why I called you. Please don't tell anybody. Tell your mother or sister. They'll really be worried. See, the thing is, this is the right attitude when it comes to death. All of us have to go one day or the other. So live and enjoy the life. Give what you can give to others and take what others are giving you, and enjoy every experience that is coming to you. Enjoy every action that you are engaging in, but be prepared to go anytime. And when death comes, go in peace and not in panic or regret. What happens to this person? What happens to this project? God will take care of it. Your role was only till that point. After that, you are not responsible. Even while you are playing a role, it is God's job. You are just an instrument that God is using for that particular role. If you have that attitude, it doesn't take away from your enjoyment. You enjoy every action and experience. You live life fully, but prepared to go any moment. And at the moment of going, thank God for using as an instrument to facilitate all these actions and experiences. Be grateful to God and just think of God when leaving, not about any unfinished task, etc. So this is really the right attitude. So basically, this attitude, unfortunately or fortunately, can come only if one has full confidence that that is not the end, but only an interval. And or alternately, you have full confidence that God, your divine mother or divine father, is going to take care of you. Nothing to worry. you like I said, basically your responsibility towards people and things in your life is only till that point. So if you have that attitude, uh, you can live life fully but still be prepared to go anytime. And the particular incident is really a great learning for me. And I mentioned that he has this unfiltered childlike attitude where he doesn't hold back whatever comes to his mind. He will just say it with brutal honesty. I'll give an example of his brutal honesty. My wife Padmaja is a good singer. She learned classical music, Carnatic music. My father really liked her singing. And my daughter Srihani, she also learned Carnatic music. And once she sang a nice piece on phone to my father. He thoroughly, immensely enjoyed it and he appreciated it. But the thing is, at the end of it, he just had to say this to his young granddaughter, who was just a child at that time. You have a melodious voice and you are very methodical and technically brilliant. But you know what? You don't possess that natural spark and spontaneity that your mother has, that your mother's singing has. I mean, who will say that to a young person, that to his own granddaughter, such a young person? He just had uh, no filters. Whatever he felt, it just came out. But the thing is, like I said, he lived a simple and austere life. Uh, I said that he just slept on bare floor and he lived just a pair of clothes and usually just a towel. But he had some weaknesses, very few. He loved old, really old Hindi movies, particularly from 1930s and 1940s. That was his young age, basically, his childhood. Particularly, Raj Kapoor's father, Prithviraj Kapoor, he was his favorite actor. And he didn't even like Prithviraj Kapoor at the Mughal Azam time where he played Akbar's role, but it was basically in 1930s 40s. He played a lot of iconic roles at that time. But particularly there was a movie called Sikandar, uh, where he played the role of Alexander. So that was one of his favorites. He actually showed it to me on his computer when we were in Mathura in 2014. And he loved old film songs. He also loved classical Carnatic music even more. And he used to go to various Tyagaraja Aradhanotsvas. He loved Tyagaraja, Purandar Das, Syamadas. But his favorite was Muthuswami Dikshitar, who used to compose in Sanskrita, and Guru Guha appears in all his compositions. He basically was taught by Kartikeya in a Guru form when he was in Kashi. So he pays tribute to Guru Guha in all his Sanskrit compositions. His favorite was Sri Muthuswami Dikshitar among Carnatic music composers. And the other thing is he loved cricket. He really enjoyed cricket. He got into it pretty late after India's World Cup win in mid 1980s, but he really really loved cricket. But and he enjoyed it till the end of his life. And as I said, he never spoke or wrote a lie, and he had a vrata for speaking truth. So when he was a lecturer at a college, a local college in our native town, there were times when he wanted to take leave, take a day off to watch a cricket match, an important cricket match. But he didn't want to mention why he was taking the leave. At the same time, he didn't want to lie. He never wanted to lie. So he wrote a leave letter in archaic Telugu using very Granthikam Telugu that made no sense to the principal. It is a Christian college called Noble College. So principal was as such not really a good Telugu scholar. So it did not make much sense to the principal. So without understanding what the leave was for, he just granted the leave. So after a couple of times, he requested, Mastaru, sir, can you please write in English next time, not in Telugu? And my father said, yeah, sure. And he was a scholar of English too, by the way. He was a scholar of many languages. So even when writing the leave letter in English, he used very flowery, indirect and archaic language, some Shakespearean words and expressions, etc. Very indirect way of describing things. So he ended up writing a very flowery letter that did not say anything untrue, but did not at the same time successfully hit the true intention, true meaning from the principal. So after reading that letter, principal said, sir, you write in whatever language, I don't care. Because he didn't understand the true intent from the English letter also. Now, not just Telugu and English, my father knew many languages. Many Indian languages and a couple of non-Indian languages also. And he was out of all the languages he knew, apart from mother tongue Telugu and Sanskrita, Devabhasha, Sanskrita of course, he particularly loved two languages. One is Punjabi, the other is Russian. And he was really fond of Russian people as well as Punjabi people, both Punjabi Hindus as well as Punjabi Sikhs. Though he never visited, and he considered the Punjabis as inherently patriotic people, and he saw Punjabi Sikhs as people that were created by great gurus to protect and somewhat isolate Hinduism, the Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, from the external intruders and invaders. So he was really proud of them for their patriotism and also simplicity and humility. Though he never visited Russia, he visited Punjab many times. And he had a special love for Amritsar. And as I mentioned earlier, the Shani temple outside of the Golden Temple. He thought it was very powerful. One of my classmates in my junior college recounted one funny incident. My father used to come. I studied at a residential college in Nagarjun Sagar, and my father visited a few times. And being a teenager, I was embarrassed with my father because he was dressed very simply. The parents of other children who visited were dressed nicely and in modern dresses, so I was kind of embarrassed by him. But the thing is, the other kids really loved him because he would just sit under a tree and people would congregate around him. He would talk about everything under sun. He was very knowledgeable about so many things. He'll just keep talking and it will be mesmerizing. So one of my classmates, he took autograph from my father. His name was his last name was Sharma, and he looked like a Punjabi. If you look at him, he was actually a Telugu, but he looked like a Punjabi. My father assumed he's a Punjabi. He gave autograph in Punjabi. He signed in Punjabi. He wrote a couple of sentences in Punjabi. So he mentioned that to me later. Talking about Punjabi people, patriots, etc. Talking about, let me mention a couple of words about politicians of the time. My father did not think much of Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru, who were highly respected by intellectuals of India at his time. He had intellectual reasons as well as astrological reasons for that, which I will not go through now. But he did not think they were really great people. Though they are very popular and respected, he saw their reputation as Mahatmas or great souls as a successful propaganda. And from that generation of Indian leaders, he truly admired Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. He also really admired Veer Savarkar, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Bhagat Singh, and also later on Lal Bahadur Shastri, who was India's Prime Minister very shortly. He was assassinated, I think, in Tashkent. As I mentioned, he was an excellent astrologer, and he basically made very specific predictions. I'll give an example. Once he correctly predicted in print and ahead in a local magazine, in a cultural magazine called Srivani, which was published locally and distributed in India. He mentioned the number of seats NTR's coalition will get in the upcoming assembly elections, state elections in Andhra Pradesh. I think 234 out of 294 or something like that. And he got exactly the same number of seats. He used only Rasi chart, Navamsa chart, Vimshotri Dasa and Gochara, and he made amazing and very specific predictions. We know rationally that there aren't enough degrees of freedom in just those parameters, and having enough degrees of freedom requires using several other Jyotish teachings of Rishis, of Parasara and others. And of course, when I mentioned that to him, when I argued, he agreed. He agreed with my points. He saw the logic in them, and he said, I'm happy with these and my mother will bless me with good predictions. You pursue whatever Parasara, Jaimini, etc. taught, and you research and you teach it to other people. He was happy with what I was doing, but he was happy with a few basic parameters. But the thing is, such was his Vagbala and intuition that he developed by leading a very simple and austere life and with his spiritual sadhana, that he could predict with uncanny accuracy. Like I said, he never made a wrong prediction. There were times when he just gave a muhurta and said, there will be heavy rain till 1 hour before the muhurta. Don't panic and make all your preparations and go through, and 1 hour before the event it will stop. You'll be able to do your whatever the event was, whether it was Sankusthapana, Graha Pravesham, so you don't have to worry. So, and it will exactly happen like that. So many people come and tell me, your father said this, It's just so crazy. It just happened that way. And sometimes there were times when he gave predictions without even knowing the chart. For example, he saw a friend of my wife on the street once, and without knowing his chart, he told him that he would go to US soon and prepare your passport, etc. Get your passport and be ready. He wasn't even trying. He was happily teaching in a local engineering college as a lecturer. So he was happy. But he very soon he ended up coming to US, and an opportunity came up, and he ended up coming to US, and he's in the Greater Boston area for a few decades, couple of decades. And whenever he meets us and we talk about my father, he mentions this incident. He saw the chart of an influential government official once, and he suspected that he had an affair based on the chart. And then he just sat on that information. And a few years later, a lady, an unmarried lady, a worker in a government office, approached him. He saw the chart and he put the two together. He concluded confidently that these two are the ones who have an affair. This is the lady with whom he has an affair. So he encountered that person on the street. He stopped him. He fought with him. He told him this is happening, right? He had no choice but to confess. And then he got everybody together, wife, the lady with which he had affair, and the person, and he made them resolve the issue and stop the affair. So in a way that is fair to all the three people involved. So he basically he did not fear anybody. He didn't think of consequences. What he thought was dharma, he always did it fearlessly. And in my own case, actually, when I was in 12th grade, intermediate, junior college, I was at this residential college, and everybody there prepares for IIT Madras, so I was also preparing for IIT entrance exam, IIT JEE. And my father said, that's enough. You don't need to write the local engineering entrance exam. There is an exam called MSET, Engineering and Medical Common Entrance Test. If you want admission to an engineering college within the state, other than IIT Madras, you need to be, other than IITs, you need to write that exam. He insisted, you don't need to write this exam because this is a great year for you. You will have great academic success this year. And I said, what if I don't get into IIT? Will I have to waste a year? He said, no, this is a tremendous year for you. You will have great academic distinctions. There's no way you are sitting idle. So don't waste 25 rupees by appearing for this exam, because that was the application fee. And I said, this is silly. You can't put all your eggs in one basket. That too, IIT, there's no guarantee of getting in. It's such a tough exam. So many smart people write. And he finally relented and made me apply. But anyway, I ended up coming state first in junior college in intermediate, and also I made it to IIT and I studied at IIT Madras. So his assessment was right. We wasted 25 rupees. That was his confidence. Which father will tell his son, put all your eggs in this big basket, this key basket, because you are guaranteed success? Who will say that? He had such confidence in his predictions. And even my birth, I was born 11 years after my parents were married. So relatives were ridiculing my mother for being childless, but my father was never worried. He knew that children were in both the charts, and during an eclipse day, actually, a year or two before, couple of years before my birth, during an eclipse, he went to a temple. Of course, temples don't do their pujas because Surya and Chandra are the keepers of dharma in the world, and because they are afflicted during an eclipse, you don't do that. It is not a good time for dharmic activity, but it is a good time because Rahu and Ketu are strong. It is a good time for kama and moksha. So if you are doing any pujas for a specific desire, or you are doing a puja just for spiritual clarity and moksha, for enlightenment, grahanas are particularly auspicious times for pujas and meditations. So he spent the time chanting various prayers, and he wrote down the names of 3 children. He first a son, second daughter, third a son. He wrote down the names, and exactly in that order we were born, starting a couple of years later. And he gave the same names, the minor tweak in the name of my sister. Though very learned, he was essentially a very simple person who followed his heart and did not care about societal constraints and formalities. When I was doing masters in US, he received the charts of a couple of girls as a match for me. He particularly liked one chart. He thought it was a highly sattvic girl, and he prayed that she would be my wife. By the way, she is my wife now, Padmaja. But the thing is, uh, he wanted to see the girl. He said this afternoon suddenly he got an inspiration. This is the right muhurta to see the girl for the first time. And they used to live a few houses down the street. Of course, they moved after I left. After I left the town to study at a residential college, so I never saw her, but they were living close by. So he wanted to see her, and my mother said, "You can't just barge in and see the girl. You have to make an appointment, talk to them first, and fix a time so that they can be prepared." He said, "No, no, I want to see her in a natural situation without preparation, just how she reacts." So he just barged into the house, and behind him, because he walks very fast, my sister and mother were coming behind, a couple of blocks behind. So he just barged in. He said he started talking to her, talking to my wife, and she was dressed in a night dress, and she was giving tuition to some engineering college students locally, some friends. And he asked all kinds of strange questions like, which fruit do you like, why not this, why not that. He just wanted to test her speaking style, temperament, etc., and assess if the horoscope is correct, horoscope that he was given is accurate. And then that was it basically for him. And also he made her she sang a song for my father and my mother. He really loved it till the end of his life. Even 2 weeks before his death, he mentioned that particular song, how she sang. So he really liked it. But at the same time, she made some grammatical errors, and he corrected those grammatical errors. And yeah, like that. Basically, he was very childlike, straightforward, and guileless. And finally, when I made up my mind that I wasn't going back to India during the summer to get married, he returned the chart, but he told the parents, "Your daughter will definitely get married before August 15, before the Shravana month ends. Definitely there is marriage in her chart." And they were worried because they weren't looking for any other matches, and they were confused by this unsolicited prediction. But of course, in the end, I changed my mind and I went back to India in mid-July, and on August 1st we got married. So that was 1993 August 1st. So his prediction did come true. But he just did what he thought was right at that time. And one more thing, those who use my Jyotish software Jagannath Hora, they should be grateful to him, because it wouldn't have happened without him. Of course, first thing is I wouldn't be on earth without my father. And second thing is he is my first astrology guru. I wouldn't get into astrology without him. But there is a third and more direct reason, which is in mid 1990s I put together a DOS command prompt version of an astrology software, and it would basically do many Jyotish calculations, but you have to type things on the command prompt in a DOS window. And my father and my mother visited us in US, in the Greater Boston area, in mid 1998, because my son was born in August 1998. So they came for the birth of my son Sriharish, and because my father is not computer literate, typing commands on a DOS prompt is not really convenient or usable by him. So I decided to convert it to a Windows GUI program. So I put a Windows GUI together and changed it so that he can just click the mouse and enter things, and he can see things more clearly. So I really put together the first, and that was Jagannath Hora. That was the first incarnation of Jagannath Hora that evolved, and a few years later, I ended up, very soon later actually, I ended up releasing it publicly 1 year later. So Jagannath Hora actually happened because my father came to US for my son Sriharish's birth. Now, one small word on my son's name. I wanted to give him a name of Vishnu, and my wife, she was doing a special Hanuman puja for his birth, before his birth. She wanted to give him a name of Lord Hanuman, and somebody suggested giving him the name of Hayagriva, a scholar, and my father liked Narasimha Swami. He was a Bhakta of Narasimha and Mahalakshmi, so he wanted to give Narasimha's name. And of course, In Andhra Pradesh, it is common to combine very many names and give a long name. Like you can call him Hayagriva Narasimha, Vishnu Hanuman, or something like that. But the thing is, we wanted to give a simple name living in US that can do justice to all these intentions. And my father came up with this brilliant idea. He said the word Hari, it means monkey, it means horse, it means lion, and also it means Vishnu. It has multiple meanings in Sanskrita. So call him Sri Harish. So that can be interpreted to mean all these things: Hayagriva, Narasimha, Hanuman, and Vishnu. So that is what we ended up calling him. And actually, one word on his own name. His full name is Venkata Subramanya Chalapati Rao. Pingali is the surname. Pingali Venkata. Actually, I mentioned in another video in the past, we are descendants of Moropant Pingle, who was the Pradhan Mantri of Chhatrapati Shivaji. He, along with Shivaji, established the Maratha empires to fight the Mughals and others. So some descendants moved to various parts of South India and settled down there. So we come from, on the paternal side, basically we are his descendants. And Pingle became Pingali in Telugu. So anyway, the first name is, surname is Pingali. So Pingali Venkata Subramanya Chalapati Rao. Subramanya Chalapati Rao is Subramanya plus Achalapati Rao. Achalam means mountain, not Chalam. So people normally, for that kind of name, they abbreviate as PVS Chalapati Rao. People use the word Chalapati Rao, but Chalapati doesn't really mean much. It is Achalapati. So he insisted to write his name as PVS Achalapati Rao, or just write PV Rao. Consider Venkata Subramanya Chalapati as one word with Sandhi and Samasa. So he did not like when people call him Chalapati Rao. But unfortunately, because that's a common way to call, many people called him Chalapati Rao. In September 2014, I decided to go to India for 3 weeks in December 2014. And this was my first trip to India after 6.5 years. And on this trip, I didn't want to split it between multiple people or multiple commitments. I wanted to spend the entire 3 weeks I could be in India with my father in December 2014. I just felt that strongly, so I decided that. And I told my father, I'll stay in Hyderabad if you want me to come and stay there with sister, mother, you, etc. Or if you want to be in our native town, Machilipatnam, I'll come there and we can stay there. If you want to go on a pilgrimage, I'll come with you. You decide how you want to spend these 3 weeks with me, and it's your call. He said, we'll go on a pilgrimage. I said, you pick the itinerary, where you want to go, how many days, in which place. You decide, we'll just do what you want to do. And then he said, give me 10 days and I will get back to you. So 10 days later, he came back and gave the itinerary. You know what he did in those 10 days? He actually, because there were Uttarakhand floods and some places were damaged, he wanted to make sure that the places he wanted to take me to were fit enough for my visit. So he actually went in September to all the places he wanted to take me, Mathura, Haridwar, Rishikesh, etc. He saw those places, and then he came back and said, okay, this is the trip that we are taking. I was really, I didn't have words, because when he mentioned that to me, he's an old man. He was in his 80s, early 80s at that time. I was a young person. So the concern he had, basically, wanting to ensure that the places were fit enough for my visit, is just too much. I knew he was much weaker than before, but he was still fit enough and he was going around by himself. But I was concerned that even offering to go on a pilgrimage to him for 3 weeks could be stressful for him. I was worried even before making that proposal in September. That is why I gave 2 other options. But he did a dry run even before we actually went together. His resilience and consideration for my perceived convenience, it was too much. It was amazing and touching. Of course, then we bought tickets and we made the trip, and he insisted, if you don't mind. Of course, he was never forceful. He basically was very gentle with me. He said, if you're okay, I want to travel by second class train. I said, yeah, whatever you want to do. So we traveled by second class train for those 3 weeks, and it was great fun. And during the pilgrimage, I once told him, innocently, why do you keep talking about children and grandchildren always so much? Time has come for you to stop thinking about all of us and just focus the mind on God and God alone. Because the last thought, like I said earlier, the last thought when you die is crucial. It decides your next steps, what happens in the next existence. So it better be on God, not on some relative. So when I mentioned that, he dismissively laughed and he said, "Don't worry about me. My mother Mahalakshmi will take care of me. I have utmost confidence. Don't worry about me." He dismissively laughed. But the thing is, when he went back to our native tongue, he told his Sishyas, "My son said this to me. See how thoughtful, wise, and considerate he is." So he was very appreciative of the fact that I was thinking along those lines, but at the same time, he was supremely confident that his mother will take care of him. And the thing is, what I realized is, he was more of a bhakta at that time. I thought that I was more in the Gnana Marga. I was basically in the path of wisdom. But as I matured more in the years after that, I realized Ishvara Pranidhana, complete surrender to Supreme, is basically the ultimate lesson you learn from wisdom, from the Gnana. All dry wisdom is really useless. So he really had that. But anyway, he actually passed away in 5 months. In May 2015, he did pass away. And he told me actually on the pilgrimage, there were several discussions about the possibility of his life coming to an end. Anyway, he also mentioned to me, by the way, he mentioned that from 2020 onwards, a very unstable and chaotic period would start for the world, and India will slowly rise, and particularly in 2030s, India will rise very high and become a superpower. So he mentioned all these things during the trip to me, and he also said when bad things start happening in the world from 2020, I won't be here. I will definitely leave by then. I said that he was attached to his children and grandchildren. He used to actually compose freestyle poetry in Sanskrita, basically without using formal meters. Every day he used to compose. And if you talk about us, his children, grandchildren, etc., at the same time it will apply to gods. For example, he would write Padmaja Ramana Venkata Rama Narasimha Prapannosmyaham, and it can be interpreted as I seek Venkatarama Narasimha, basically my name, husband of Padmaja, my wife. Or you can also interpret it as I seek the Lord of Lakshmi, who is Venkateshwara, who is Rama, who is also Narasimha. So you can interpret it as a prayer of God as well as remembering his sons, grandchildren, etc. Of course, one interesting thing is a true bhakta may seem to be engaged and attached to various people and things till the last minute, but still mind may be focused on God. See, God's ways are very strange, and he is the giver of bondage as well as freedom in the end. It takes an attosecond, nanosecond, attosecond, femtosecond for God to free you. So the trust in God is very important, that complete surrender. My father actually told my niece, who was one of his favorites, my sister's daughter, he told her many years back that he will not cross 82 years of age. He will die before that. And he would have on 2015, July 15, he would have crossed 82 years, but he passed away in May. Even in our conversations during the pilgrimage 5 months before that, in December 2014, he referred to the possibility of death in mid-2015, and he asked me for my own astrological assessment, which of course I did not. By the way, he marked the dates of his death and his cremation as well as his Asti Samchaya. He marked those 3 dates in red in the Panchanga in the weeks before leaving. And also, looks like a few days before, he had another experience. He wrote down, next time I try, I should try in the sitting position, not in the lying down position. So something suspicious like that he wrote down in red on a particular day in the Panchanga, and the days when he died and cremation and Asisanchaya, he marked in red, and he gave several subtle indications to people around him in the weeks before he left, and he gave hints to some Sishyas during a trip to Tirumala a few weeks before his death. And one of his Sishyas, a businessman, local businessman, he was a very committed and devoted Sishya to my father. He asked him to prepare a particular food. My father never asked anybody to do things like that. He asked this person to prepare a specific food for him and get it one night, and he did it with purity, with madi, and he got the food. He ate it and he blessed the person, and he also gave some money, I forgot, a lakh or two, to that person, and said, when he insisted on not taking, he said, it is my blessing, you have to keep it with you. So he was basically clearing a few things karmically before he left, And actually, one funny thing is, when we were on a pilgrimage, he met one person in Guntur. He met one person, and he just strikes conversation with anybody he meets. Whereas I tend to be aloof. I don't talk to people that much. I'm happy in solitude. He loves talking to people. He's alone, but when he's with people, he loves talking. So in the train, he talked to an old gentleman, and he said, "I'll come to your house. Give me your phone number." And then he gave the phone number, and then 1 week before his death, when he talked to me on the phone, he said, "This person, Samsevara, I think the name, Samsevara Garu," I said that I'll come to his house, but I misplaced the phone number. I searched throughout all my records, but I did not find it. So I guess that particular word of mine will be a lie. It will go wrong. So basically, he was thinking about it 1 week before his death. When he finally, actually a couple of days before he died, his younger brother, who lives in the same town, he visited him 2 days in a row. And he asked, "Why are you coming every day to check whether I'm alive?" "I'm still alive, at least till today, don't worry." He sent them away. And when he finally left the body, he was sitting in his father's chair, an old chair, and he was sitting in a he was sitting in a meditative pose, and there were a few drops of blood from his nose and ears, and there was a crack at the top of his head, the crown of his head, and that is typically a sign of life force leaving through Brahmarandra. One thing is, as I said, to sum up, in happiness or in sadness or in anger, he was like a child, especially towards the end of his life. Being a worshipper of Lord Narasimha, he did exhibit some short temper in certain situations, but he was always guileless, and there was no filter in his brain or mind that made calculations and changed or adapted his words, gestures, behavior, etc. based on the circumstances. He highly minimized his needs and gave others much more than what he received from others. I was living in US and I was well off, but he never really took any money from me. Instead, he wanted to give me. He was like that always. He led a very simple and austere life. He never spoke a lie, and he did not fear anybody or anything or any situation, and he said what he believed was satya, and he did what he believed was dharma. He felt happiness. He was not above feelings. He felt happiness, he felt sadness and anger in several situations, and expressed them without holding back or putting on a mask for others or trying to maintain a particular image for the world. But at the same time, he was completely devoted to his mother Mahalakshmi and was supremely confident that she would take care of him in the end. Even a couple of days before he left, he talked to a Sishya in detail about the Leela of Mahalakshmi and how she controls everything in the universe. And though she started to be of Sattva nature, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, even Tamas that is controlled by Nila Shakti is actually controlled by her. Nila Shakti is also a form of Mahalakshmi. So he was completely immersed in Mahalakshmi towards the end of his life. And Dr. Manish Pandit, he met my father during the 2006 Satsandi Homa, where the seeds for our Do Homa Yourself movement were sown. So he met my father. So he was the first person I called when I found out that my father left earth. He passed away. So when I mentioned that, the first words that Dr. Manish Pandit said to me were, "Narasimha, it is the end of an era." Indeed, in the old India, there were a lot of people like this, who were very dharmik, very fearless, did not care about material things, lived a very simple life, simple living but high thinking, and developed lot of spiritual power and used it to benefit people around them, and did not seek limelight, fame, etc. So we had a lot of people in old India like that, but in new materialistic India, such people are increasingly rare. He belongs to a very rare class of bhaktas and yogis, and I am pretty sure that Mother Mahalakshmi must indeed have taken care of him. And I hope that the incidents and the characteristics that I tried to describe will be of some inspiration and will be of some use and help to various spiritual seekers and also astrology students. Thank you very much. Om Tat Sat Sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu. Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. सर्वे जनाः सुखिनो भवन्तु। यावद्भूमण्डले सनातनधर्मो वर्धतु। विशेषतः भरतखण्डे, अमेरिकावर्षे, टिबेट् राष्ट्रे च। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।